So we are going to be discussing, of course, the leadership in education, how it is looking like currently in India, globally, of course, and we're going to touch base on quite a few points in terms of what is it exactly, what do we mean by it, how can it be improved, how has it evolved, and multiple more things to discuss. Welcome, everybody. I see a lot of chats coming in. Good evening, everyone. Great. I see people joining in from all around the world. Thank you so much. Perfect. Great. So what I'll do is I'll quickly go ahead and introduce all of our panelists quickly while people are still joining in. Great. And in no particular order, I'm going to start with our first panelist. We have Dr. Jagpreet Singh. Dr. Jagpreet Singh is an eminent educationist of India, a gold medalist at the Rajasthan University. He believes that a teacher is the most powerful influence on a child and has served for 24 years at Mayo College, Ajmer. During his tenure at Mayo College, he was a part of the teacher exchange program with distinguished institutions like Eton College, UK, and the King's School, Australia. Thereafter, he moved to the Punjab public school, Nabha, as a headmaster for 10 years and brought laurels to the school nationally. He's the honorary secretary and sports director of IPSC schools, and with his vast experience and knowledge in the education sector, he's also now the headmaster of the prestigious Doon School, Dehradun. Welcome so much, sir. It's a privilege for us to have you here. Great. Moving on, we have Dr. Sumer Bahadur Singh with us. Dr. Sumer Singh is an alumnus of the Doon School and St. Stephen's College. He received an honorary doctorate in education from De Montfort University, UK. He's taught at St. Anne's, Windermere and Box Hill in England, Gordonstown in Scotland, the UWC of the Atlantic in Wales, and the Doon School, Dehradun as well. He was head of school at Lawrence School, Sanar, and director of Asian School, Dehradun, Delhi College, and Delhi College Business School in Indore. He's currently president of the Boarding Schools Association of India, on the boards of PPS Nabha and Infobeans, and on the council boards of World Leading Schools Association. He has even authored 6 books and held 3 one-man exhibitions of oil on canvas as well. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. It's a real honor.
My pleasure.
Moving on, we have Dr. Snehal Pinto, a lifelong learner. Dr. Snehal Pinto is a passionate educator and currently serves as director at the Ryan International Group of Institutions, India's largest privately owned chain of K-12 institutions. She has a rich experience of over 20 years in various capacities, including teaching and leadership. She has completed her doctorate in education from Nova Southeastern University, USA. She's a former president of the Association of Schools for the Indian School Certificate and has been a member of the CISCE as well. Dr. Pinto has been acknowledged worldwide as a visionary thought leader for her significant contribution in enhancing the teaching learning process. And she has recently been awarded with the ATL Teachers of Change Award in Maharashtra State for her exemplary leadership to galvanize innovation in education. Thank you so much for joining us, ma'am.
Thank you for having me here.
Great. And moving on, we have Mr. Siddharth Singh with us. Mr. Siddharth Singh is the director of the Emerald Heights International School, Indore. He's completed his education from the Stony Brook University in the United States, where he pursued a double major in economics and finance and was acknowledged with a distinction, a cum laude for economics. He later acquired an MBA with specialization in marketing and finance and has been involved with a project in China based on the industrial streamlining of the working system, and has also done a course on strategic leadership management from IIM Kozhikode and pursued an education leadership course at Harvard Graduate School of Education. He was selected by Education World magazine as one of the young shining stars of the Indian education system in 2017 and was facilitated as the ASMA India's Top 40 Under 40 Awards for 2021. It's a real privilege to have you here with us, sir. And last but not the least, we have Lieutenant General Surender Kulkarni with us. He's a director at Mayo College, Ajmer. Lieutenant Kulkarni has served in the Indian Army for about 4 decades. He was commissioned into the Armored Corps in 1975. In recognition of his special contribution, he's also been awarded the highest peacetime distinguished service award in the armed forces, the Param Vishesh Seva Medal by the President of India. Parallel to his army career, he's also an economics graduate from Ferguson College, Pune. He was a postgraduate UGC Merit Scholar before he joined the Army. He has 4 master's degrees, including an MPhil degree. He's an alumnus of Mayo College, Ajmer. Presently, he's also a director at Mayo College as well. Thank you so much for joining us, Lieutenant. It's a real pleasure. And Moving forward, we have our moderator, Mr. Parikshit Dhanda. Although he needs no introduction, but I'm still going to go ahead and introduce him formally for everybody. Professionally trained from Harvard University, Mr. Dhanda is one of the leading life coaches, motivational speakers, and career coaches in the country. With over 20 years of experience, he has mentored and trained more than 2 million students across various domains and regions. Understanding students' aspirations, along with their aptitude and motivating them to achieve excellence, has kept him busy for more than 2 decades. Thank you so much for joining us here as well, sir. Over to you now.
Thank you. Thank you, Raghav. And I welcome all my distinguished panelists on behalf of Mindler and, of course, on behalf of International Certified Career Coach Program. The educators are with us since morning, and they have been, learning a variety of areas, and now they are so very eager to listen to all of you. Dear guests and participants, we have the stalwarts of the Indian education here with us this evening. The topic is leadership in education. I'll just give you a very simple context here. Leadership has been talked about many times, but leadership has never been challenged like this in especially last few years. There is so much to talk about, and there are stories all around. And today, that's why we have got this star-studded list to discuss how do we look at leadership in education, and especially leadership right through these days. So therefore, I like to start with Mr. Sumer. If you could kind of share your opening remarks, and then I'm going to go to each one of you, each one of our panelists, for opening remarks before we make the floor open. Mr. Sumer.
Thank you, Parikshit. Well, I'm going to open with a little incident that took place, and that was in China before the pandemic, when I spent some time with Jack Ma of Alibaba. His executives had decided as a gift to him to start a business school, and he had decided to call it School for Entrepreneurs. He asked me whether I was willing to be a guest speaker coming in from India every now and then, and asked me what I would talk on. So I said my subject for this level is leadership. And he said, Sumer, leadership can't be taught. Either you are a leader or you're not a leader. So we disagreed on this. We had long discussions. And I think I proved to him that leadership is something that not only can be taught, but must be taught. And at the end of it, one of the hostesses came to me at dinner and said, what have you been talking to him about? Because he's decided to change the name of the institute from School for Entrepreneurs to School for Leadership. So I think that is actually where we can start off, that leadership can be taught, and now we need to discuss how it can be.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Very insightful beginning. Jatpreet, over to you, please.
Thank you, Parikshit, and I'll take exactly the connect from where Dr. Sumer left. Leadership is a very widely talked term today in every manner. And we talk about leadership, and I'm reminded of a very beautiful phrase which says, leadership is like a hat which has lost its shape because everybody's wearing it. Everybody wants to wear it in the style of its own leadership. And leadership has not got a single definition today. So what is definition of leadership today? And particularly in context to the educational leadership, I'm talking about two leaderships here. I'm talking about educational leadership as the leaders who run the school and the leadership within the school. How do you introduce leadership within the schools? Most of the schools wait that they are preparing leaders. They go to the universities, they pass out from the universities and get an opportunity of getting leadership. But leaderships are actually inculcated in the younger ages when they are sitting in the desks of the classrooms. And I very strongly believe the leadership today has been challenged to that extent that from a manager to a reformer and an organizer, today the leader has become more challenged a word because everything is so spontaneous. People have come with a 30 years, 40 years of leadership experience. But today, that's meaningless. Today's leadership has taken a completely new look. And with the pandemic hitting in the educational institutions, I think Parikshit and all will agree with me, leaderships are being tested at every point. And I'm so glad that you've got this on the floor of debate, that we all are going to deliberate on this and learn from each other. Thank you, Parikshit.
Thank you so much. And I'm picking up both, I'm picking up from Mr. Sumer, where he talked about leadership can be taught. And of course, I'll come back to you on leadership at a young age. So we'll definitely keep these 2 points in mind. General Kulkarni, over to you, please.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you asked me to speak after Dr. Japri, because he just said people come with 40 years of leadership experience and it's a waste of time. Well, I am the culprit there. I came with 40 years of leadership experience into this. Now, let me tell you, I came from an organization, the Indian Army or the Armed Forces, where we are the largest institution in the country, which has an organized leadership program, which never ends till you finish your service. So there is a training program running around, internally, laterally, externally, and hierarchically. And therefore, I do agree with both my predecessors. One, leadership can be taught. If somebody has a gift, well, good luck for him or her, but that's an exception. It can be taught, it must be taught, and it must be taught right from the youngest possible age. You can't wait that one fine day manna will fall from heaven. It has to be taught and nurtured institutionally. So every school has to have a program, not by giving titles to students, but by allowing them to understand what is leadership and how to find a variety of forms of leadership. You don't have to be only Virat Kohli or someone to be the captain. There are many leaders even within the Indian cricket team, and who lead in different occasions at different circumstances. So let me be quite brief about this. 3 things. 1, leadership can be taught. Number 2, leadership must be taught at all levels. And number 3, leadership is useful if it can make that person who's the leader gradually irrelevant. Because if you need to be always there, then there is something flawed in your system of leadership. So these 3 things I thought would suffice for now.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's given me another idea now. You talked about, the leader being irrelevant. So definitely one of the things that we could also, put on the table is decentralized leadership. We'll definitely talk about that also. Thank you. Thank you. Snehal, you're the only lady on the block. So I'm going to come to you at the last, okay? Because women have the last word. Siddharth, over to you first.
So good evening, everyone. And I agree with everything that the other panelists have said about leadership. For me, when we talk about leadership in terms of school, in terms of context of school leadership, for me, leadership is like a joint family. You have multiple leaders. It requires a lot of love, and everyone's role is defined. The head's role is defined, the teacher's role is defined, the sports instructor's role is defined, and students, their role is defined. And it's ever evolving. As we go along, as the family progresses, the leadership roles change. And that is what as educationists we have to do. We have to give that authority to everyone in the institution. As General Kulkarni rightly said, that, everyone leadership has to be decentralized and everyone's role has to be defined, because that's how we train our students. That's how we give them the exposure they are required. And in schools, specifically in school, leadership is it's not the cutthroat leadership that we see in the companies. In school, leadership is about empathy. It's about resilience. It's about, giving someone another chance. And it's around a lot of love, I feel. That's what, makes us educationists. Our leadership is about love and empathy. So I think, going ahead, for me, leadership is like a big joint family. And that's how schools should be run. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Siddharth. Snehal. Your opening remarks, please.
Besides agreeing with each of the leaders out here, I want to firstly thank you for having me here. It's a privilege to be even on the same panel as the stalwarts. Just speaking about leadership in the context of school education, for me, it is a daily practice to lead by example. I've seen visible leadership demonstrated by my parents, and for me, it's to take that on further. It is a tremendous responsibility, of course, and an opportunity as well. The idea is to create an environment which is conducive for collective growth, like Siddharth said earlier, each one together. And it is also about empowering and helping people find their own purpose, their own potential, setting them on that path where they can discover their own potential. No one is with us forever, but the fact that they can be with you for a season of their lives and grow and mature and evolve and move ahead in life, that to me is helps as a role of a leader, helps in facilitating growth of the people, and which means our school heads, our teachers, how we can help them achieve their own professional and personal goals, create the conditions for them to experiment and take risks as well. It helps ignite curiosity as well, nurture creativity, all of those things, but also empower them to be creators and contributors. And most importantly, what I love is learning for life. So that's my
much. Thank you so much, Snehal. Mr. Sumer, if you look at the list that Snehal has given, it's a long list. Okay, my God, if we could do all this in all our institutions, I'm 100% sure we are going to be the topmost country as far as education is concerned. So my question to you is, if the long list that Snehal has talked about, and of course, which each one of you has talked about, how do we teach leadership? How do we train leaders within our school system?
Well, I go back to 1935 when the Doon School was founded and A. Foote was appointed as the headmaster. And the first thing he did was, for the dignity of the individual, be it an 11-year-old child or a senior, he made it a rule that if any teacher hit a child and the child reported it, the teacher had to leave within 24 hours. Now, this was unheard of in 1935 when corporal punishment was there across the board in all countries. He got a letter from the principal of the King George Royal Military College saying that you're making a big mistake. You will never be able to discipline 400 students without corporal punishment. And he wrote back and said that we have two different roles. You have a role of producing people who will learn how to give orders and obey orders because you are training for the army. I have been given the role that when India becomes independent and there is a vacuum of leadership in all spheres, some of my boys will rise to the occasion and fill those vacuums. And therefore, I don't believe in anything except self-discipline. I don't want people to do the right thing when someone is watching or to impress someone else. I want them to do the right thing because they believe that is the right thing and they have the courage of their conviction. Now, leadership on its own, he, of course, gave the opportunities to the children right from class 12. He gave it to the teachers through the student council, through committees, through clubs and societies, and the various positions small children, big children held, and the way they were mentored. But more important was that he realized that leadership cannot be anything but ethical. It has to be a moral leadership. It has to be a leadership where there is empathy, where there is compassion, and where there is cooperation. So, he introduced leadership through, for example, adventure. He made all of us students go on midterms every 6 months. For 5 days, we would disappear into the wilds with rations. We had to cook our own food and survive and cooperate with each other for that survival. This was because he believed that unless you had the spirit of adventure in you, you would not be able to take bold decisions when the time came. He believed that we should be democratic and agree to disagree whenever necessary. And so in the school council, all ages were represented. In the weekly, which has been coming out every week through all these years since 1935, children can write what they like as long as it's not slanderous. And it is respected, it is debated, it is discussed, because he felt that a democratic India is what we must be prepared for. And the third thing, which I feel is most important, when my father joined the Doon School, Foot told his father that please don't tell your wife what we are going to be doing with your son, because he is going to have to work not only in the houses of people whom you call outcasts or low castes, but he's going to be having to do a lot of relief work in disaster areas, and he's going to have to rub shoulders with everyone, but this is our system. And he believed that unless you develop through service, empathy, and compassion, you could not be a true leader. And we have seen that there have been people who have been academically very bright, academically leading in all spheres, but who don't have the ethical aspect to their leadership, who can actually create all kinds of problems for us and for the country. And we can look back and look forward and see how many of the leaders in this country are showing an ethical aspect to their leadership and how many are looking at it from a very selfish point of view. So I think that is what I would like to talk about, that how do you train leaders? There are different areas in which you have to look to give them the opportunities, and you have to look at different areas to give them the qualities.
Thank you. Thank you so much. General, picking up from where Mr. Sumer left, now he's talked about, right from ethics to being humane and self-discipline and so many other things that he's talked about. How do we take it down to the student level?
Yeah. Firstly, this is something we want to imbibe in every child of ours. Every child, any student, you'd like to have all these qualities in that child. All right. But leadership, as Dr. Jakpreet had said, at different levels, it has different meanings. Right? If you're working in a communal environment, in a community group, then the kind of leadership you need to display has to rest on collaboration, empathy, a sense of democratic values, etc., etc. And yet there are places, if you are expecting the general at Galwan to ask the soldiers, would you mind stopping the Chinese? If you do, are you feeling, I hope you're not feeling too cold this morning. It doesn't work. So therefore, you will find some of the best or the most successful leaders, like Steve Jobs, was an awful guy to spend time with, right? But he's created the biggest and best company in the world. We've had generals like Eisenhower, who got everybody together in World War II. And then you had people, others, who were ruthless leaders. All right. So therefore, there is no one magical formula of leadership, right? You can have an abusive leader and people will blindly follow that person and ignore those 4-letter words. And you can have someone who just says bloody and you can take deep offense to it. So therefore, it is very difficult to put your finger on this. But what you can train leaders to understand are 3-4 things. Number one is that you got to think beyond yourself. You got to think for that group that you are either part of or entrusted with. It could be either way. Number 3, are you looking merely for the present or are you looking at the future? For example, at school leadership level, there are many effective school leaders who are running their schools very well, but they're not looking beyond. The recent pandemic is a classic example, and I've said this to so many people. We have adapted very well. We failed to anticipate. You couldn't have anticipated the pandemic, but what was your primary tool to respond to the pandemic? EdTech. EdTech was around for many, many years now. The congruence of all smart devices had happened by 2007. The pandemic came in end of 2019 or early 2020. What were we doing for 10 to 12 years? So therefore, leadership also has a visionary element. And by the time you become the head of a school, if you don't have that little spark in you, which you can develop as you go along, then I think you will only be an effective leader. I mean, to take an example, and I hope Snehal doesn't mind, they have a very large conglomerate of schools, but their primary leadership is driven by the Pinto family. So therefore, heads of schools of various Ryan schools don't have to have the same degree of visionary leadership that Dr. Jakpreet has to do for Doon School, which is a standalone school. Seen. And hence, the timelines also matter. And the most important thing, I think, which counts for a leader as seen by their immediate group, which is around them, is how do you respond when things don't go well? You know, when all is going well, everybody's also clapping for each other and the leader. The problem is when things don't go well, then whom do you look up to for what to do next? And very often, and I'll tell you example, military example from Sri Lanka, where the Indian Army took a knock. You know, we went for as a friendship force, and then it became ugly. Many of the junior leaders and commanders who were not seen to be flamboyant, gladiators, stars of tomorrow, were the rock solid guys who actually delivered. So circumstances also throw up leadership in you. And therefore, in a school environment, you have to create what I often call controlled adversity. And when you create controlled adversity, you realize who are the guys who have the depth and the grit to shine through in adverse circumstances.
Thank you. Thank you, General. Very, very insightful, and also sharing a perspective on leadership. Jakpreet, I'm coming to you to help me with how leadership can be taken down to the students, and how can they exhibit leadership during their formative years, please. And I would then go to Siddharth with the same question, okay?
You know, Parikshit, this is very, very close to me, because leadership in the context of the school education, it should be such that can be imbibed by the children. It means being an education leader who's super flexible. Because leadership can sometimes in school go very wrong when you become very rigid. I believe in school, create leaders by giving them an opportunity to watch what a good leader can do, what a good leader should be like. It also means encouraging, very important word I'm going to speak is diversified leadership. Now, this is going to be very important when we are talking about leaderships in schools. How do we get this leadership within the school ecosystem? The leader in the school has to think about hiring people with high potential. Because as a leader, he knows how to identify potential. He needs to entrust them with opportunities to lead. That trust factor is very important for a leader. Apart from being flexible, he needs to have a very high element of trust. He must encourage in school collaborative work, what General just said, at multiple levels. And very important word, we keep saying mentoring. No, the school leaders don't have to mentor, they have to coach. They have to encourage them to understand the vision and let that vision be their vision too. I've seen institutions, I've been to the schools, and I've seen that the people on the upper layer know what the visions or the mission of the school is, but the people down don't even know what the vision or what the mission of the leader is. Most organizations fail as the employees are unaware of the vision or do not align with the vision. I think in a school, it's very important to be a reflective and a compassionate leader. It's very important. Everybody has talked about empathy. Everybody has talked about ethics. But compassion is again a very good strength of a leader, and particularly talking about schools. They learn what they see, and they see the leader and they emulate. I think in school, Parikshit, what I feel, we should focus on improving giving instructions. I'm saying improving, giving instructions, especially helpful in bettering academic results and teacher development. But for me, if you ask me, the leader's role in the school is to bring out the talents and potential of all to achieve the educational goals, whether they are students or teaching community, but the entire community must have a vision all along very clear, aligned a vision to run the school and make it a success. That's from my side. Thank you.
Siddharth, what are a few things that you'd like to talk about, especially during the formative years of students?
I think, teaching leadership at school level is extremely important. And how you can do that is you have to expose the children to different avenues, because every child is different. And when we are talking about, in school, you don't have one or two or three, we have thousands and thousands of children that you need to train. And especially in a large school context like the Ryan Group, you have lakhs of students to train. So leadership has to be part of your system. Now, when we talk about leadership at school level, leadership can be, can be taught, or, you can give the child the exposure. Every child has to be given the exposure to kind of train as a leader. And that can be done through various conferences. It can be done through sports activities. It can be done through community service activities. It can be done through outdoor learning activities, the experiential learning that we spoke about. So school has to make sure that they are doing, or they are putting in efforts to do all these things, to give an all-round education to the children, and giving the children an opportunity to exhibit leadership. Because as we have, the current situation that we are in right now, we have to be very, very aware of what kind of generation we are dealing with. Today, the students think that by posting a comment on Instagram or Twitter, that's leadership, or trolling someone or creating a fake profile. So we have to tell, educate our students that leadership is on the ground. It's not about writing something online. They have to go on the ground if they want to make any changes in our society, and if they want to actually make a difference in our society. So social media, I think, is one of the biggest, I would say, blockades in leadership for our children today, because they are completely online, and they are being, a lot of misrepresentation is out there where leadership is concerned. Also, they have to understand that you have to be a very transformational leader today, because the situation is changing every week, especially in the COVID circumstances. 2 weeks you're open and 4 weeks you're online. So you don't know what's going to happen next month. Maybe a new variant shows up. So where leadership in education is concerned, it has to be transformation. And we have to be updated with what our kids are watching, with what our kids are doing, because our leadership style has to adapt to what our, I would say, what our audience is. So we have to change with time, and we have to explore and give them more avenues to train themselves and experience leadership at school level. Thank you.
Thank you, Siddharth. Very valid points there. Very, very valid points. Snehal, picking up from where Siddharth left, and he talked about how the pandemic, how things turned. So my question to you will be, how has leadership evolved, especially during pandemic? I mean, you're running 100 plus schools. It must have been a great challenge. So how do you think leadership evolved during this time?
Just taking from, can you hear me? Yeah. Taking from what Siddharth said, since we're such a large group, we had to be prepared. And alluding to what General Kulkarni said earlier about, the vision comes from a small lot, not necessarily, I think, because in this time, over time, we have learned about being collaborative with different generations at the workplace. you can't stick to a certain style of leadership. You have to evolve. Things like empathy and mentoring, all of that does not happen in the vacuum of relationships. It happens in the realm of relationships. And that is something we have learned over the years. We have learned from our colleagues. We've learned from the ones who work with us. But I think the idea was right at the start, when EdTech started, we were amongst the first in the 80s where computer education began. We were among the first. Similarly, when it was time to switch and transit to the tech platform, we were already on it for a part of our operations. So transiting was not difficult. The training to conduct different kinds of classes, that was something to bring all the generations on the same page. That was something that we found was a bit of a challenge. But nevertheless, I have to give a shout out to all the teachers out there, because each one rose up to the occasion, committed themselves wholeheartedly. I mean, in spite of the odds, and please understand, we serve different demographics across India. So for each one of them to rise up to the occasion, in spite of their challenges at home, in spite of their, circumstances, to be committed to teaching their kids. And it was not just 8 to 3 clock, mind you. Assignments were coming in at 11 as well. And then to teach the kids to draw boundaries, teach them discipline, accountability. I think that was something that we learned over this time in the pandemic, where, activities suddenly became virtual. And nevertheless, in terms of developing leadership, and this is something this is a part of us. This is right from the young age. Responsibility is something that develops leadership in you. You give a child responsibility, or if a child or a teacher takes on responsibility, I think leadership development starts happening. And over the time, even during the pandemic, we had kids putting up events, kids putting up, programs for the parents, for the school. And that itself, embedded leadership development in the course of the pandemic is something we saw within the school system. Transiting to the EdTech platform just in time was something we saw within the pandemic. And for us, it's heartening. We need more input and ever ready to learn from peers. And I think that is something we saw in the course of this entire 2.5 years. It was no longer being in your silo. It was reaching out and asking, hey, how did it work for you? And we got to get across, get to know more educators across India in the course of, learning together.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Mr. Sumer, I am picking up a question from Salma Noshid here. Siddharth also talked about, how social media, distractions, responsibility, and Snehal also talked about giving responsibility to the teachers. How important is counseling and leadership or career guidance to students, especially of this generation?
Okay, thank you. I first would like to underline some key words which have been used by Siddharth: exposure, opportunity, experiential, and transformational. And that is what we have to decide. Are we transformational teachers, transformational schools, or do we just transact academics for money? That is the difference. And what Snehal just said about giving responsibility and how people respond well to responsibility. Coming to the counselors, first of all, I'd like to say that there is a huge difference between academics and education. And what Einstein said, that education is what you have after you have forgotten everything that you learned in school. He didn't mean everything, but he meant academics. He was talking about academics because at that time, that was the main thing that was transacted. And the counselors have no problem knowing who's got 98% and 97 and 96 and 80% and so on. But their job is to go beyond that And, there are two things that I would like to request for. One is I would like to request the heads to stop ranking students in class academically, because students are supposed to compete against themselves, not against each other. And Singapore has seen this, and they have banned ranking. They made it illegal, because there is no point in telling people where they stand in the class. There, you have to make them understand, they have to improve on what they are. The second thing is, and this is what I would like the counselors to think about, that when children join school at the age of 3, 98% of them think differently to each other. Only 2% may be thinking the same as the other. 98% of them are individuals who have a different thought process. By the time they leave school after class 12, 98% of them think similarly, and only 2% think differently. And those poor 2% are considered to be outsiders, different, weird. But the fact of the matter is that every child is an individual, and the counselor is in a position to understand where the passion is, where the talent is, and to advise accordingly. So, when I was in school, we didn't have counselors. There was no need for counselors because there were not more than 6 professions that you could go into. Today, we just can't keep track of the number of professions that are available. It is only the counselors who can help a child be guided, not sent into, but guided into the avenues which suit the child's capacity, talent, and passion. And I think this is my advice to counselors, that you have to really be able to understand the child before you can counsel.
Jakprit, I'm going to ask you the same question because I know this matter is very close to your heart, right? So your comments on the same.
I would go back a little. We are talking about counselors, and we are talking about the most of the schools today, what Dr. Sumer very rightly said, that we have come into the ranking world. And somewhere the school have become the competitors today, that which are better schools? Now, how to find which are better schools? Who provides better college placements? Whose children are going where all? Which universities, where are they hitting? I'm going far more beyond. I'm saying, before we lead a child to the careers, why can't we enrich a child within the school at an early age with the child counselors giving the life skills? Why can't we give him empathy? Why can't we give him those all life skills which will further enhance him to be a better citizen, that he can choose the right path, that he will lead to the careers? Careers are the very last stage of his academic life in a school. Every child, I keep telling my own boys in the school, I said, we all are learners, lifelong learners. We'll get an opportunity of going to the university again. I can do a course right now sitting in the Harvard, but then we'll never get a school life again. Why do we say that the school life is so important? What we learn in school remains with us. That becomes a very important traits of our personality. That's where we learn empathy. That's where we learn compassion. That's where we learn every soft skill. And that leads us to be a person on what we can develop our careers. As we talk about careers, I only have to say that career guidance empowers the student with knowledge. It empowers the student with information and skills, which help in becoming a confident, motivated, and productive student. I know the career counselors, students learn to identify their potential and develop new skill sets. That makes the choice very easy, and a decision maker, that what encourages him to be a better thinker. Now he has tools in his hand to pick up his career. He can arrive to a conclusion. But what is more important? Important is, what he takes from the school, we all as important leaders here have been talking about. Has he taken the school moral values, ethics, what he's learned in his leadership, carry that forward? I don't think his ranks are ever going to be important, whether he stood with a 99% or whether it was a 90%. He will always be remembered. He was a great boy. I could always have a back on him. I could always depend on him. He was one of those bum chums who I could always relate to. If I go back to my school life, I only remember of the friends who stood by me in my good or bad days. If I failed, they've stood by me. If I was successful, they rejoiced with me. I think these are little things what the counselors need to understand, that before giving them careers, give them all those tools to handle the careers which they can take in the later life. Thank you.
True. Beautifully put. Siddharth, all the educators who are listening to us, if you were to give few tips on leadership, right? There are principals, vice principals, and other educators who are listening to us. What are few things that you'd like to share? These are best practices that are happening in your institution that you'd like to share.
I think, as I said earlier in my last statement, that, developing leadership at a younger age is very, very important. And giving exposure to children in different activities, be it experiential learning, be it sports, be it conferences, be it MUNs, when they travel outside for sports. So all these little things, doing community service, actually going to the field, not the community service where you just donate money or you give something and you don't actually see the person you're giving it to. Actually going on ground, executing a project, building something, adding value to someone's life, teaching someone, all those things add to the leadership in a child's, in the child's personality. And as they go on, it also helps them find their way, find their passion. Are they passionate about sports? Are they passionate about, community service? Are they passionate about science? Whatever they're passionate about. And as Dr. Jagpreet Singh and Dr. Sumer Singh rightly said, that adds to the career guidance later in their life. Then career guidance comes in, and there is, I think in India, and I would like to say this, I remember on a lighter note, in fact, I remember a couple of years back, I gave an ad in Indore about, I would like to hire a counselor. So a lot of people showed up and I asked them that, what do you do? They said, we convince parents to join the school. So, or join the university or a college. So the word counselor in India, I think people don't really understand what a counselor is. They confuse it with a doctor, with a psychologist. They confuse it with someone who has to convince the parents to join the school. Very few people, recognize the counselor word with a career counselor, because people think that career counseling ki kya zarurat hai? You get 95, you go to DU. Where is the counseling there? So I think in India, we really need to work on that mindset. We really need to put in a lot of efforts, a lot of investment has to be made in terms of, getting that right guidance in place in all the schools, where we are able to guide the students and, who are able to navigate and find the right path. And that is what will give them the right, exposure to leadership and, make them successful human beings in life. And when I say that, I don't mean getting 95 in class 12 boards or getting into Harvard, finding the right fit, whatever it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Siddharth. General, if we would, because you have been in a unique position on both sides of the equation, right from armed forces to here, my request to you would be if you could share a few tips on personal leadership.
Yeah, the first thing, I don't think I lay claim to any great this thing, but I'm a product of a large system in place. As a former student in Mayo College itself, and later on in the armed forces, I was a product of a system. If I show you my school report card, I would not even get a pass course in any university. Some may not even give me after paying, money. All right. And yet, if you see in my report card, my principal then, and he's a well-known figure, Mr. Shomit Das, I think he's very well known all over in education. He had written there that, look, this guy has it in him, to make it tomorrow. When I went to the military academy, I was first in the UPSC order of merit. By the time I finished and got commissioned as an officer, I was at the bottom of the course. There again, some wise young captain who was my platoon commander wrote, we have three categories there. Will he make a good leader under strict supervision, under supervision, or independently? Despite where I stood in the order of merit, that young captain wrote that he will do well independently. Okay, so therefore, what we must understand as a practical tip of leadership is this, that while a child is in school, let us not steal the childhood from the child. That is the biggest bane that we are going through, number one. As far as the teachers are concerned, the teachers themselves studied in a different environment. They were taught by people in a different environment, and they did a B.Ed course, which is way out of touch with reality. So therefore, before we get down to teaching the students, we have to teach the teachers. And one of the lessons from the pandemic is now we need to teach the parents as well, because they can all go online and tell you 5 tips to great parenting and 3 ways to make your child a genius and stuff like that. So the parents need to be this thing. And therefore, apart from having a career counselor, and I take pride in our career counseling department, it's very important that each teacher is a counselor in himself or herself. Because if the teacher doesn't know that what this subject can lead to in tomorrow's life for their child, how will they expose them? They will still be stuck in that JEE, NEET, CLAT mentality. And those are just a few of the superficially prominent career options today. So I feel that we as leaders, our main role is to create the ecosystem in which all these stakeholders flourish. And I fully agree with this whole business of ranking, that if you want to churn out of like a factory, get enough intake, and if the whole purpose of 12, 14 years of school education is to get into a college, then I'm afraid I'm not on the same page at all.
Thank you. Very heartening to know. Thank you so much. Just a lot of reassurance there. Snehal, now you have a very...
Sorry, Prakshit, sorry, can I just come in for a moment? Snehal, please, my apologies to you.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, this is I think I said a lot of serious stuff. Let me say it in a lighter way. I'm having a look, at all the comments in the chat box, and I suspect that we have far more experts out there than those on your panel. Okay, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Snehal. Now, on one side we are talking about mentoring, counseling, career guidance, right? You are also in a unique role, because you are also kind of mentoring the leaders, leaders in hundreds of schools, right? And of course, it will trickle down to the students also. So what I'm trying to understand is, how are you looking at mentoring and career guidance?
So just alluding to what Dr. Japrit said earlier, I wouldn't formalize mentoring. It's more like coaching. There is an embedded just system in place where there is training at the front end, but through different activities and responsibilities that happen, that teachers take on, there is identification of talent, there's identification of their strengths. And to work with that, to leverage those strengths is something that is already within the system. Everything cannot be incumbent on the head of the school. That's why there are different delegated teams within the school, and they are not necessarily with a formal position. But there is a program constantly in periodically about a quarterly, where the teams come in, there is a collab session, there is feedback session, there is a feedback and feed forward session, and it's helpful for their own planning. There are many things that we need to put in place, of course, and we can't necessarily find that we haven't found that we are on the same pace in every school, but you find there are pockets of excellence across the schools, and that is why to raise them up to become leader of leaders. And that is why we find that people keep asking, you guys manage such a big network, and you run such a big, it's not possible without teams and teams of people. Those teams don't happen in a vacuum. They happen because of training. Many in the early times with when sir and ma'am were doing it, it was hands-on. Then we put it down in document and it was formalized, and we were able to then run training programs. But nevertheless, the real thing happens when it is experiential, when it is hands-on. And most often, most of the feedback that we have received from the teachers that are there with us, as well as beyond, who have moved on to other places, is the experience that they had while on the job, the feedback, the input that they received, that is what helped them grow. No, I don't remember people remembering the programs as much as the input of people. It's so much, it's so much as, how feedback was given, the tone, the voice, who said it, how was it said it in the audience, and people remember that. And finally, I think, the school education is a unique ecosystem. It is in the realm of those relationships that we thrive, that we grow. You will find almost every teacher a leader, and they are the ones who really identify the talents and the strengths of the children. We sitting at some part of India are not able to really reach out there. And I remember the story, and this happened because of a teacher. And I'm taking this story only because of that. I remember this kid, Piyush, who started in 8th standard. We have the system where the kids who do well overall, they receive a red tie. And in one of the schools, and Piyush was a shy boy, but he was, he participated in every activity, event, and went on to become the president of the school. And the school parliament is something that was established in the schools, where the teachers and the students, students are appointed by a democratic process of voting and all of that. So we have the president, prime minister, all of that. And then this kid went on to become the president. When he was asked, what do you want to do ahead in life? He said, I want to become the youngest president of the country. And we have been following, he is one of the kids, we have been following his life journey. He went on to Wharton, went on to study public policy at Kennedy, came back, worked in a constituency, worked under a minister, Ajay Markan, and went on to now start his own crowdfunding platform. It's called Impact Guru. He and his wife have received the Forbes 40 under 40 along with my brother. So it's a very proud moment. When you see that trajectory of, leadership right from the young age, there's a teacher there who was responsible for just guiding him towards just taking part in those activities. And I won't forget Aarti's contribution in this. She's one of the who's still with us, and we are very proud to have people like that. These are the ones at the grassroots for the teachers as well, and along with the teachers, it happens with the students as well. It's through the different activities, events like Siddharth said. It has to happen in the realm of everyday things. It has to be simple. It can't be, big jargon thrown on to us. It has to be simple. It has to come out of the realm of relationships. And that is something I've learned.
Thanks for sharing that story. Quite motivating, Snehal. Mr. Sumer, if you could share a story, please, how you encouraged, leadership in your institution.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to do that. When I went to the Delhi College as the principal, it was a good school, no doubt, but it had a totally centralized leadership. The desk of the principal had files and files piled up, waiting for decisions to be taken. And in a school, you can't wait for a decision. A decision has to be taken very quickly, especially when you're dealing with children. What I did was I appointed directors who later on, director of sport, director of academics, the normal stuff which has happened in so many schools, and actually gave them all the authority, and they would only come to me if they required to. Otherwise, they could take their decisions. Now, what I did was, in fact, that I overloaded them deliberately. I overloaded them with so much that they had to start depending on other teachers. And eventually they realized that they could not actually accomplish what they were supposed to accomplish without the cooperation of the students. And when we had it in 2007, an international conference with 700 people from all over the world, we gave it entirely to the students to manage. Not a single teacher came on stage. There was no, all the roles were being played by the students. They looked after the guests, they interacted with the guests. There was a transformation that took place in that school. And I think it was because of the opportunity, because of the opportunity is actually the biggest word. They got the opportunity, they rose to it. And today I see them doing extremely well in life. It's a great sense of satisfaction. So I don't agree with Jakpreet and Snehal when they say mentorship is not a good idea. Mentorship is what it's all about. You know, a leader creates leaders around him and eventually disappears into becoming, as the general said, into becoming a mentor. He disappears from the scene. He lets everyone else manage it. So I think, yes, I had a great success in Delhi College by diffused leadership, by handing over responsibility to the children and coming to the conclusion in my old age that the best run schools are run by the children. Thank you.
Thank you. That was lovely there. Dr. Jakpreet, Mr. Siddharth, if you'd like to share your closing remarks, please.
Well, thank you, Parikshit. I think probably this has been a fantastic journey of learning and, of course, learning from each other. But I would just like to give you a small little story about my school, about when I, a little less than 2 years back, when I joined Doon School. I thought I was coming with a rich background with more than 3 decades of teaching experience, being heading a school for the 10 years. You think you're well accomplished and you're coming into a school like being in Mayo for 24 years. So it was like following a legacy. But when I came to Doon School, I realized what is so different about it. And the very important job given to me by the board was to design the Doon School curriculum. Now, they said we are an IB school, we are a Cambridge school, we are a ICSE school. That's okay. Those are evaluation boards. Those are assessment boards. What is Doon School? What is that 6 years of the journey of the Doon School? What DOSCOs made in those 6 years? And what is the learning curve in those 6 years? And when I was drafting that, there were 6 pillars which we came across. Definitely academic excellence was one of them, which every child aspires when they come to the school. But what we got from our motto of the school, knowledge and light, is like there is a very beautiful balance between the teachers and the student community. And the community of DOSCOs who live in Chandpad is a very unique concept, which I've not seen in any school, truly. And this is because we imbibed in the curriculum in such a manner, which said teachers can be learners and students can be teachers. And this happens so correct when I'll tell you a little anecdote. And we tell these students, we don't tell, by the way, the students explore their journey in 6 years. When we talk about, when Dr. Sumer was talking, I said mentoring could be done to the adults and coaching to be done to the students. This is what I meant. And that's exactly what they say. There's an element of risk we allow. When he was talking about adventure, there's risk. And that risk taking is very important for every child to transform his journey. And ultimate, he gets a joy. And I'll give you a small example. My first founders in the Doon School is like, oh. And I was walking to the Rose Bowl without knowing what I'm heading for. And my head boy was staying with me because we were in COVID, there were no students. And this boy, I was in my academic gown, and this boy in a smart school outfit, the school captain, and walking with me. And I call it the walk for the headmaster. I call this, and I'm writing about it, what it really transformed me into. And he's telling me, headmaster, if everything would have been normal, or the crowd would be sitting here, as you would enter the Rose Bowl, they would all stand for you, and the speeches would begin, and this would happen. I was learning from that young boy. Students can be the teachers. And very same evening, he walks up, because he was staying with me. There was another boy, Karthik, and he walked up to me and he said, HM, what are you doing tonight? I said, why? No, we want to take you somewhere. And I said, they are going to now clown with me because I'm a new HM and they're taking me for a ride. That's what every new headmaster is treated like. And I said, okay, I'll trust you and I'll go with you. They said, well, come out at 9 o'clock. We are waiting outside your gate. And I went out and they had a jacket, a night vision camera, the binoculars, a torch and everything. And I said, hey, where are we going? I'm not taking you out anywhere. There's pandemic. They said, no, we don't have to go anywhere out when we are in Chandra. They took me to a cut. This is the deep forest, what we have inside the school. And they took me for owling. And for the first time, I understood what owling is. Otherwise, ullu hum sab bante hain. But when a child makes you an ullu and says, okay, this is how I teach you the legacy of the school, it was a great learning. And that is what I mean by leadership. When they give even a headmaster a walk of lesson, and that lesson remains with him throughout his life. I think this is what leaderships are.
Beautiful, beautiful. Siddharth.
I think we have, in the last hour or so, we have learned so much about leadership and so many different viewpoints about leadership. And I think I agree with what Dr. Jakpreet Singh has said and what Dr. Sumer Singh has said, that, as leaders, we have to be mentors, and you're only successful when leadership is happening at every level. That means leadership is happening at the teacher level, at the student level, and that is only possible when it's part of your system. It as Snehal rightly said, that it cannot be one day in school that today we are going to do leadership and rest of the time the child is coming and they're studying and they're going home. So today's schools have to be equipped with much more other than academics. If schools are only doing academics, that means they're failing at leadership, very frankly. The purpose of schools is not to get 90% because that's happening in every school. I don't think there is any school in India which doesn't have a student scoring above 90%. So I think that's not the purpose. The purpose is much more, and we need to explore that purpose. And I'm also thankful to Dr. Sumer Singh, because I don't think he said that, but he has been a mentor to me also. And so I am one of his, students who's, trying to do something. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Siddharth, for that candid share. General, your last closing remarks, please.
Yeah, I'll tell you, to put this whole story into context. I have a statement I make very frequently in my school, because I have studied in the same school. I always say that I am the senior most student of Mayo College, and therefore I demand the unlimited from my teachers. Right? And therefore everything that is done has to be done from the perspective and from the eyes of a student. The moment we start running a school from the eyes of a student, a lot of what has been said today falls into place very, very obviously. And that is the core of the issue. We don't have to look down upon these little objects who are roaming around as, our students. You got to see it from their eyes. And the moment you see everything from their eyes, it's very easy. It's no more a burden. It's no more a challenge. Yes, it puts a lot of pressure on teachers, because I'll give a small example. If I ask somebody of my generation who thinks they're very tech savvy, what is BTS? They will tell you, this is the jargon for behind the scenes, But you talk to the little kids, they'll tell you, no, this is a South Korean K-pop band. You get me? So the world is different. And unfortunately, most of our teachers are 2-3 generations behind the present lot of kids. And therefore, the moment you start seeing things from the child's perspective, I assure you, you don't have to worry, leadership will fall into place.
Thank you, General. And thanks to each one of you. Dear participants, I know you've been listening to this, and what an engaging conversation that was. As Siddharth put it, there is so much that's been discussed here. So many, perspectives, viewpoints on leadership, contextual leadership. This recording can be one lesson on leadership. So thank you so much to Dr. Sumer, General Kulkarni, Dr. Snehal, Mr. Siddharth, Dr. Jakpreet. Thank you so much for being here. It's been lovely talking to each one of you. And I'm 100% sure if you look at the comments, each one of the educator has enjoyed this. Raghav, over to you.
Thank you so much, sir. And thank you so much, panelists, for joining us. I think it was a brilliant session. In fact, I have had so much to take away and even, make notes, because eventually I know I'm going to be using these nuggets here and there in the future as well. I know sir is smiling because he knows that's what we do. We take notes and we're always learning. But thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much, sir, for moderating it so flawlessly. And I think the chat says it all. There are brilliant comments coming in. I hope everybody's had a chance to kind of read them. And thank you so much, participants, for joining us. I think you are the crux of it all that makes it so important and so energizing at the end of the day. So thank you so much for joining in. And of course, stay tuned to more ICCC panels. For those of you who joined us from the foundation program today, we are looking forward to having you with us tomorrow, bright and early. And for the rest of you all, we will see you very soon. Please keep learning and make sure you are going to become great leaders. Thank you so much, everybody. And thank you so much, panelists, once again. Take care, stay safe, and have a lovely evening.
Thank you again. God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Stay safe.